Ladies and gentlemen, ATDF Everything in That Shelf presentation. You're now rocking with TDF Everything. Spoiled Rotten.
Spoiler alert.
Welcome back, everybody.
Hey.
It's me, Daniel,
And Ben
on Spoiled Rotten.
on that shelf.
I almost said that shelf. All right. So we're doing X2 X-Men United today, in case you had to guess, if you go into these things blind.
A little goodie from the 2006 year.
No, 2004. See, you already mixed up 3 and 2.
Oh, no, sorry. I was reading the long line. Released from 2003, though, it says.
Well,
What?
yes, it is 2003.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Sorry, I read the wrong line immediately. 2003. And, what a movie. What a movie. So, rewatching this, one of the first questions I have for you is, do you think this holds up?
I think it holds up in so much as it is definitely better than the first one, and anything I liked about it initially holds up in terms of me being like, oh, they just went there on more consistent basis. Like, there's a lot more of Wolverine like using his, well, there's the famous kitchen scene where he just straight up stabs a guy through the chest with his claws. Yes. But like they're also doing a lot of stuff to like show how painful it is for him, like when he puts the cigar out in his hand, or when they do the flashback and it's like the first time his claws go through his skin, so it's all covered in blood. That wouldn't be the first time, but the first time we see, or his first memory of it with all the bloody stuff, because he just came out of surgery. When he gets shot in the head, like just the time it takes for that to heal. I think this movie is leaning into the powers and what they can do a lot more. And I don't know if that's just a function of more money or just actually having confidence that people like this stuff. Because sorry, what were you gonna say?
So I think that's one of the things that I really, really agreed, because one of the effective scenes in driving home that point makes me think of the Deathstrike and Wolverine fight in the dam, and just like how painful that is, and the extremities of how far he had to go to win that fight. It wasn't just like, oh, I'm going to knock this person out and they're going to stay down. They can't actually stay down until I kill them in the most epic and brutalizing way that I can possibly think of. Anyways.
Right, like he already thought electrocuting her was enough. Like he kind of electrocutes her, puts her in the water, and she still comes back. And like even what she's doing to him throughout, like she's like probably like cutting tendons. She's like stabbing him just through the throat and stuff. So I feel like this movie feels like the training wheels are off.
Yes.
And that in that much, I like it. I will say I did kind of get bored by the end of it, but I think that's also a function of that's usually what happens with me with Bryan Singer films.
Yes.
Is I'm not, even if I am interested in the concept, I usually find the execution underwhelming. So the positive stuff I have to say about this is it is a great improvement on the first movie in terms of just even the look of it, but also like the lengths they go to show you what these people can do.
Yes. The powers are much better understood. They build off of stuff. I think a lot of the criticisms we have of the first one, this one builds off of. And I think one of the most notable points here is just basically how well they have developed everyone's powers, abilities, and understanding them, but not overdeveloping into the idea where we got the X-ray monologuing kind of perspective where it's like, I'm this person and I do this. Yeah. Exactly. So we have a really show, not tell kind of way of explaining everyone's powers and using that perspective.
Or even just like, I still like the whole sequence around Magneto's jailbreak. Like the fact that like Mystique like seduces this guy. She knocks him out. She injects him with all the iron so that Magneto can get it. And yes, they do say, "Oh, there's too much iron in your blood," but it's still like a nice kind of like long play until he says exactly what was happening. Like it is this nice long play of like showing you what everyone's skills are in that sequence.
Yes, because I remember that in that scene, the first time around when I was watching, I distinctly remember being like, "What happened there?" Because
Right.
like I thought like she must be the shittiest assassin in the world to
Right.
not kill the guy.
The
Yeah,
first time I saw it, I thought maybe, oh, she's just trying to kill him. But
yeah.
like,
Or like my other assumption was, oh, she's just trying to take him out of the picture so
and
that
then
she
she'll do
can
it.
pose as the guy and break him out. Like I thought that was the most obvious kind of reason why that was the setup. And then you see him and you're like, that must be Mystique, and like the machine can't tell it's Mystique, and that's how good she is. And then you're like, no, not at all. I'm like, it's the iron thing. So that was a really, really good revelation thing. I was truly surprised by that as a kid.
Yeah. So I think stuff like that, and even like the Storm stuff this time around seems way better.
Yes.
Like when she helps get them out of trouble with all the fighter jets, and like she's just full on using her powers. I get that it's not a lot for her to do as an actor, but just like if you're immersed in the movie, it's really well done to be like she can do more than just shoot lightning at people.
Yeah.
Or even like when she makes it so cold that Jason loses his like he just loses his concentration, and then that's what helps them break free. Like I just like that that's kind of my thing is, while it's not like as fun to me this time around, it's still like the stuff that I fundamentally thought made it good is still works for me.
So speaking about the Storm stuff, one of the things I really, really enjoyed about the Storm stuff is that from what I saw is that her role as a leader is much more solidified in this one. She's taking charge. She's driving the plane. She's doing all those kind of things. And Cyclops, who's traditionally in that role, or at least the way they framed it in the first one, didn't actually take that role this time around, and it was
just
really
sidelined.
refreshing. He was very sidelined in this one, and it's very refreshing to actually see them putting Storm in that position, and that's why I like this one much better, because not only did she have a better role emotionally speaking, but from a leadership standpoint, she also had that.
Because it's showing, and I think you like hit the nail on the head, like showing how intricate her powers can be, or at least like how powerful her powers are.
Yeah.
And why she would be more of a leader. Like I get the sense that like, and something else I also like is even before Cyclops' sideline, it's not like he's leading that expedition to go get Nightcrawler.
Yes.
Like, oh yeah, like they're going, like Jean Grey and Storm are going to do it. Like the two actual powerful mutants here.
Correct.
Like the ones that can actually do something, not just me because I'm like the white guy that can like have a chiseled jaw or whatever.
But so here's the other thing, and of course, talking about the X-Men properties, we always have to talk about civil topics and all that kind of stuff, and social topics and all that kind of stuff. And this time around, watching this movie, do you think there was a lot more? I can think of a lot more evidence of it being more socially aware of what it's trying to do this time around.
Well, I mean, I listen when I first owned this on DVD or whatever, I listened to the commentary track, so I know that Singer went into this movie more thinking about gay rights.
Right.
And that was his framing device for this movie. He talks very directly and specifically about how people can always see this as an allegory, and specifically when you have the scene with Iceman's parents. And I even read that Ian McKellen actually rewrote that scene so that it would feel more authentic as a coming out scene.
Right.
So I feel like this production was working with that stuff. Like,
yeah.
And yes, there's always that element of Stan Lee may have been thinking about Black civil rights, but that's kind of the power of art, is people can kind of map on what they want to, and there's definitely the element of people from the LGBTQ plus community being able to be like, yeah, that's me. And so I'm happy. So it's not even like I'm like, oh, like they should have kept the black focus. I'm like, no, like any marginalized people that see something in this, and that's kind of what I like about film is using that to kind of explore more uncomfortable truths. Like,
Right.
I think like, yeah, cool, that's what they wanted to focus on for this.
No, I think my initial question here was not framed properly. Maybe perhaps I was thinking, do you think they do a better job leaning into these issues this time
Oh
around
well, I mean,
and
I think
portraying them?
as we already stated in the first movie, that's not what they were trying to do. So
Right.
the
But
term "better" seems kind of a moot point because this
that's a good
time they're
point.
actually trying to do it.
True. That's very true.
And I guess we also talked about how Bryan Singer loved the cartoons, but this, I didn't know this because I didn't really read like X-Men graphic novels, but this is just straight up the graphic novel God Loves, Man Kills, where Stryker. So the differences in the movie are Stryker is turned into a military man. He's usually a religious person, like a religious zealot.
Oh,
And
really?
the big difference is in the comic, Magneto saves Charles, but in this one they changed it, and I like it. It's kind of just for the time being. Magneto's like, yeah, I'll help out, but then at the end he's like, oh, like I can get him to kill humans. Great, I'm out. See you. So those are the two big differences between the graphic novel, but it seems like it's pretty much the same thing otherwise. And those are two interesting changes because then you're linking Stryker to Wolverine. I think that's also something I liked, is that this does feel like a natural progression from the first movie. You're actually spending time trying to be like, oh, Wolverine's not just back because like you see him finish up what he started at the end of the last movie. Magneto's still in jail, so we still have to deal with how is he going to get out of jail. Like I liked that they weren't just like, no, whatever, it's a new chapter. Like it was like, no, like we have to set the pieces for the story we want to tell, and we're going to be bringing in the elements from the first movie. So I think that was really well done as well.
Yeah, it's easy to say that this is easily the most, in terms of continuity, the movie with the best continuity, just because they had the least to do in terms of keeping in mind continuity issues. So it's so refreshing to see it from that perspective as well, instead of when we start integrating the First Class stuff and taking that into consideration,
or even the third movie, because
exactly,
like
the continuity there is pretty
so
bad.
what I would say is I forgot that Kitty Pryde wasn't Ellen Page in this movie.
Yes.
I was thinking about the third. So I don't know if it's the same actress, but it is still not Ellen Page. But they still set up the Kitty Pryde and Colossus love interest thing, which even in the third movie, it's a different actor, and they completely abandon it so they can do the love triangle with Iceman. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, like I guess they're just not. The third movie, like even though it's obviously having to take, or even the fact that like they completely change Hank McCoy from the I mean, that makes sense because you're not going to get Kelsey Grammer to do just that one scene. But yeah, I think the first and second movies
or
even like the fact that Toad's not in it or Sabretooth is weird.
Yeah, well, that's one of the biggest things. Is I was thinking the lack of continuity. Like, there's still continuity issues in regards to they've lost those two pieces of the puzzle, but it's more of a natural. Like, I could understand that from a writing perspective a lot more naturally than anything else, because it's like, okay, at the end of the movie of X-Men, we're kind of left with Mystique kind of running off on her own, and then basically Magneto's captured, right? So whether or not Toad and Sabretooth would be able to join back up is a different story altogether.
It's less a continuity error, just like, oh, that's Sexton out there. But they did write it so that Toad and Nightcrawler were going to have a fight together at the end of the movie.
In this one? I can see that happening. And it's one of those things where, I thought two things in that opening scene with the Nightcrawler and the President. I thought, what a good blueprint for later on what happens with the Quicksilver scenes. and B, how great would it have been to see Frog and Nightcrawler battle each other?
Mhm.
And to know that it was planned and know that it wasn't executed out makes me a little upset and pretty sad.
Another thing that was planned, which I liked, was when Stryker has tricked, Stryker's son has tricked Professor X into basically trying to kill the mutants. They were going to show like the characters we already know, but they were going to then show Hank McCoy going full beast. Like that trauma is what shows him going full beast. And they're going to show Gambit like at a card game, and they filmed it with Hugh Jackman's stunt double, so that it could just be filmed from behind, and you don't have to like commit to an actor. You could just have the presence of him and show like him going crazy as well.
Right.
That's also something I would have liked to see.
Yeah. It would have been a fun little cameo to hint at those bigger worlds, and it would have been really, really fun.
Yeah, but I mean, as the story goes, it's a good story. Stryker comes and he's like, I'm gonna abduct Professor X, get him to use my Cerebro, which will then while he uses his so yeah, Stryker's whole point is, I gave you my son to fix him, and we as the audience know there's nothing to fix. He's a mutant. Like you don't send mutants to Professor X to make them not be mutants. You send them to like hone their skills. So then it seems like the issue is more Stryker and his son Jason just did not get along, and he made his mom kill herself by drilling a hole in her head. And so you're kind of like, yeah, I get why Stryker wants to really fuck with Professor X now and get rid of mutants.
Yeah, like rewatching that scene, it was really, really, really interesting because Stryker, and of course, I don't know how much truth there is in what the character says, but the character says in that the dialogue there was that he hated himself and blamed us for his condition. So to me, I'm like, was it one of those things where I would have loved if there was a little bit more indication of like he genuinely tried to help and then just fell apart, and then you got pushed.
What I would imagine is he hates his parents for not accepting him. I don't think he hates them for them being mute, for him being a mutant. But obviously, if you're a parent that's like, I don't want a mutant kid, you'll see it as, well, he obviously hates that we turned him into a mutant instead of no, your kid hates you for not accepting them and supporting them.
And I guess what I was trying to figure out there is whether or not you thought it was more along the lines of, did Stryker originally, was he supportive of it and the kid just hated himself so much that he did this? Or do you think it was that he hated, like everyone hated everything and then it ended up this way?
No, I don't think. Well, that's what I just said.
You don't think that was the case? Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
I don't think you go from being supportive to that. Like, no, I don't think he was being supportive at all. I think, so anyway, that's the setup for the movie. And Magneto, I guess because the abduction happens in front of Magneto, that he uses. Oh no, sorry. Stryker has this thing he uses to control mutants, and he does it to Magneto. So there is this element of like, it's not, I mean, it looks framing wise and even showing Magneto scraping at the table like how you would film some kind of sexual assault in something else.
Yeah.
So there is that element of being violated and being like, oh, I'm going to get this guy back. So that's kind of what puts Magneto on the same page as the X-Men of like, all right, we have the same enemy right now.
Yes.
We're all going for the same thing. And I like that the change was made that like, he is with the X-Men until he doesn't need them, until he doesn't need them anymore. He's kind of like, yeah, I got what I wanted out of this, so I'm out.
Yep, it's very consistent. It's the whole time through, and I like the idea that none of the X-Men are actually liking the fact that him and Mystique are there either. Like,
exactly.
They're really protesting it. And they're just like, well, what's the other option here? Is the reality of what they do. Yeah, and you know what? Going back to the Storm thing, even looking at the poster for the theatrical release poster, Storm and Wolverine are both above all the other X-Men. That's a very interesting thing how they really, really, really framed Storm in a
I would
better light.
imagine that speaks to star power at that point.
Yeah, yeah. It was. It's really, really good to see that.
I think it's clear, even if Hugh Jackman isn't a star, Wolverine is the star of these movies,
Wolverine,
and then Halle Berry is a star at this point in time.
Yeah.
No one. I mean, yeah, the poster I'm looking at doesn't even have Professor X on it.
The poster I'm looking at doesn't even have Jean Grey in it. It has.
I have Jean Grey, Magneto, Rogue, Iceman, Nightcrawler, Pyro for some reason, then Storm and Wolverine at the top.
Wow. Imagine them being like, but wait for the third movie. You're going to get your spotlight when like Jean Grey turns into Phoenix. Imagine if that was in the negotiations. Like, this is what we have planned for the third one. So this is why the promotional materials, oh God, that would have been so bad.
I really like Nightcrawler as a character in this movie.
Yeah.
I like that he's got kind of his thing with everyone. Mm-hmm. He's got his thing with Storm, where it's kind of like her anger versus his faith and what gets them through. I don't remember his thing with Wolverine, but they have a thing together as well.
I think, the Nightcrawler character was so interesting to me because you get to see like everyone's fundamental beliefs of why they're fighting this fight. And it's so cool because, you know, from Mystique's perspective, I think that was the greatest revelation there too for him, was the idea of like, if you can hide, why don't you just do that? And then she's like, well, because we shouldn't have to. And I think that really gets through to him, because he's very, very, very shy and like closed off and like secluded and isolated, which is consistent with what his character is supposed to be. And then he starts to open up later. And I think that's really, really fantastic for his character to consistently have that development, because this time around, we're not introduced to the eyes of the X-Men through Rogue. Rogue's not our person that's carrying the story through, which is very, very cool, because it's the storylines. Do you think they're as cohesive without that central character carrying the story, the movie through? I agree. Yeah.
I think I just think it's a good setup. It's Professor X has been abducted. A bunch of the students have been kidnapped as well, and they got to go there. And Magneto's going there to get revenge for what Stryker did to him. And that's very straightforward. I do like a lot of the stuff between Iceman and Wolverine, and like how Iceman obviously sees Wolverine as a like a romantic rival, which is interesting because I always liked this scene where I feel like it was in the cartoon as well, but like Mystique goes into the tent with Logan and like obviously starts off with Jean Grey, but then is like, listen, you know what I want here. So let me know what I need to look like to make this happen. And she goes to Storm. But then she goes to Rogue, and the camera kind of like stays on that for a while, as if like he needs to consider whether or not he sees Rogue that way.
Oh, you know what? I remember that from the animated series.
In the animated series, it was more just like quick cuts. Like it was more like she turns into Deadpool. She turns into more like it's less of a sexual thing and more of like a just like trying to mess with his head. Like, what do you want? Because then she backs off the sexual stuff and turns into Stryker, and it's like, is this what you want? Like, is this
I can just be the vehicle for any fantasy,
like a connection to. Well, more like a connection to your past. Is that what you want more than the sexual thing right now? Like,
yeah, of course.
Yeah,
just basically the saying like, I can give you just anything you want, like from that, or fulfill any fantasy you want. To be more realistic there, from that standpoint. Yeah, this movie just it just works so much better. And I really liked it because there are so many things that just leans into so much more, and I think it had the confidence that the audience would remember enough from the first one to launch off into this one. And I think that's what I really respected about this is right from the beginning, there's a really, really go, go, go nature to it without feeling rushed. And then, of course, it does slow down in the middle because it is Singer. And then we get some excitement again. The fight scenes again follow through really, really, really well. I think one of the fight scenes I want to give credit to is the character of Cyclops, for example. He really did do a lot more fighting this time, close quarters combat, instead of just relying on the eyes. And I think that was really, really cool to see. Because, you know, previously I've always joked that it's like Cyclops is, okay, just like going to look at you. And that's about it. But he really they go to show that he's got his
He has
own
to beat up the
chops to prove
guards
as
when
well.
he's trying to save Professor X.
Exactly.
Does he must have something with Lady Deathstrike that doesn't last too long, right?
It doesn't last too long. No, because we
It
don't
wouldn't be
really
able to because he can't heal. So like as soon as she like stabs him, you're like, well, he's out.
Yeah. It's I think it's really interesting too how the movie goes to show certain matchups just wouldn't work out. But at that same time, Deathstrike and Stryker would have completely had that control thing under Deathstrike, because it seems like I was under the impression that he had different formulations to do different things instead of just one formulation.
One thing, like I can control them now.
Yeah, like it seemed like he had different formulations. Like the one that he gave to Deathstrike seemed to just like cognitively hold her in check, as opposed to you know, it seemed to just basically leash her and but allowed her powers to be used for defense purposes.
I just took that as she's been on it for the longest, so like
right,
it's just different because like you're not going from never listening to him to having to listen to him. You're just going to like, oh, yep, back to this again.
But what I'm saying is that it seems like to me Stryker, the one that he used on Magneto was just to fully suppress him, versus the one Stryker used on Deathstrike was didn't really suppress her powers at all. But there was no way
because I don't know what he would need to suppress on Magneto. There's no metal for him to control, so he's just an old man at that point, and he beat him up anyway. And what he did, it's still the mind control, because he's like, now tell me everything I need to know.
Oh, right. At that point, it was fully the mind control. Yeah. Sorry. It was
it's always mind control.
Formulation. It was the same formulation. Yeah. I was trying to figure out whether or not it was the same thing. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I don't know that there's anything for Magneto to control at the point that Stryker gets to him, which is why Mystique has to do what she does. It needs to like introduce that element that he can actually manipulate.
Yeah.
The next time they go in there. But yeah, I think his whole thing is just he can do mind control with that formula.
Gotcha. It's just a straightforward one formula that does one thing, not different types. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
What else is there? So one thing that felt very of the time was the use of police in this movie.
Yeah.
The way Iceman's brother, like the worst type of person ever, calls the police on his own brother to be like, I need the cops, my brother is a mutant.
Yeah, like, just basically just that victimizing. The weaponization is victimizing. Yeah.
Of like, and it's what I talk about all the time of like, I know people like to meme it and make a joke of like, oh, Karen calling the police, but what really is happening is them acknowledging like, I have this power against you that you'll never have against me, which is I dial these 3 digits and your life is ruined.
Yep.
I mean, emotionally, physically, like it could be the actual end of your life, it could be end of your life professionally, but all I have to do is call the police and you're done. And when they get there, right away they just shoot to kill Wolverine. He's on the phone, they're like, put down the knives. He's like, I can't. He retracts them and they shoot him dead.
Yeah.
Obviously he's Wolverine, so he's gonna stay alive, but there's no like tense standoff. It's like, do this. He's like, look, they're part of me, and they're like, kill him. Just boom. And I'm like, yep, that's 2003, but it's still happening now. Like, just that trigger readiness with cops and the inability to actually de-escalate a situation, and just really going in there to like
Mhm.
basically, I know a lot of people also bring this up, to be the punisher instead of an actual cop, like to go
Yep.
in there and like dole out justice that way, which isn't justice. That's just
Mhm.
being a vigilante.
Yeah, because it, there was just so much about that scene that is so well done from that perspective. It's just showing it how bad it actually is, how trigger ready everyone actually is. Going into the scene from the cop standpoint, how emotional and how untrained that cop was to deal with the whole situation. Like that was the one thing I was thinking the entire time was like, he is nervous, he's shaking, everything about it is like he is not the person to be dealing with it. Who is? Is this, and this is throughout the whole police force there, nobody was capable of doing it. They just kind of escalated the situation more and more and more.
What I would say, I know people
bad.
don't like
Yeah.
hearing this, but what
Yeah.
I would say is I think they were trained, what they did is exactly what they're trained to do
I agree.
in real life and in the movie.
I agree.
I don't think it's an element of, oh, they're not trained. I think there is an element of like, oh, just kill them. Like
Yep.
it's you or them, and there's no need to actually have a conversation. Just kill them.
Yep. No, I agree with you. And even then, it's just like the shakiness and all that kind of stuff, the anxiety, and all. It just there's no training to de-escalate whatsoever.
No.
And it's just because he knows what he has to do in that scene. It's just like you see from his standpoint. It's like you know in his cop training mind, it's just like I have to de-escalate, and that means I have to shoot. That's
Because
what
like that wasn't like a
see in
shot
his
that
mind.
grazed his head. That
No,
was
it
like
wasn't.
directly in the middle of his forehead.
Yeah.
So he wasn't that nervous, or at
Yeah.
least he is trained well enough that even when he's that nervous and shaky, he can do a kill shot like that.
Yep, exactly. It wasn't a shot to de-escalate the situation. Let's say if he shot his leg, for example.
Yeah.
Like
To just like
to be like, okay,
incapacitate him. Like,
yeah, we're gonna be like, okay, you're not complying. We're gonna do this, or even reach for something other than a lethal option first. Like here's a taser. Here's
Yeah.
like pepper spray or whatever. There's nothing like that because the call was ambiguous though. Like the call was basically him weaponizing his victimhood and all that kind of stuff, being like, oh, they're holding us here against our will. None of that is true.
well, what I would say is I think
yeah.
the analog here is, I mean, we saw it with Amy Cooper as well. Like there is
Yes.
an element of, I know what to say that would be like that kind of wink to the cops of like,
Right.
you know what you're doing when you get here.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't really matter what the actual situation is.
Yeah.
So yes, in this world, there probably is an element of, hey, if you have a mutant on the premise, call us, we'll get rid of them.
Yeah.
But like that, and I feel like there's that same kind of agreement with a certain type of person and the cops of like, hey, if you've got an undesirable on your property, they could be black, they could be Hispanic, like just not look like you.
Yeah.
And
For whatever
give us
reason.
a call, we'll get rid of them.
Yeah.
Like, and that's, I think, I don't know. And you asked earlier, like, again, like how well they leaned into like real life issues. This is one, right? And this isn't to say this doesn't happen. I know it for a fact this happens to people of the
Yes, it does,
LGBTQ like plus
Yep.
community. Like they're zoned off specifically for that, so that it's like, yeah, we're gonna go up and beat up on people like that. And this is
Yep.
exactly what's happening in this movie. Of like, you just need to make that call, give that kind of verbal wink to the cops, and it's like, all right, we know what we're here to do. We're coming in, and there is no de-escalation involved. We're just
Yep.
here to like get rid of them.
Correct. Yep.
So I think that was another thing that was well done for this movie.
Yeah.
Is you might think like, oh, like that's so crazy, but now that we're seeing video, now that it's being documented on video, like it's harder to be like, oh, what a crazy like sci-fi moment. It's like, no,
Yeah.
like that happens to
Nope,
people,
this
and
is
they don't need to be
reality.
Wolverine.
Yeah.
They don't even have the special powers of healing.
Yeah. It just needs to be any reason to be different, and this is what will happen. And yeah, this scene is very, very difficult to watch because it is exactly that. And that's why this movie ages well, sadly for that reason. Is for especially current day stuff that we're dealing with is just like, oh, it still happens. So of course it's in this day and age. The stuff that makes it dated doesn't make it dated anymore. You know, like the idea that he's like, oh, the stuff that used to make it dated is like, oh, the type of car he drives, or oh, that was the newest model. Like that doesn't matter at all compared to the reality of what they're actually dealing with in this movie. And it's tough to watch. It really is.
Yeah, because I mean they really draw it out in terms of like, because then you're supposed to look at Pyro as the bad guy, but it's like, I mean, you corner people for long enough, they're gonna lash back. And yes, the movie is trying to say like, oh, he would just be bad anyway, but it's like, it's kind of like, if you are looking at this realistic or on both sides of like, yeah, Professor X has got the kind of like, let's just get along with humans, and Magneto's kind of been like, I mean, they've had time to get along with us and they chose not to, so like, why are we even trying to like engage in that discourse? With examples like this where like all that needs to happen is the cops need to be there and they will shoot to kill. Like there was no, like, Wolverine didn't shoot anything at them, and they didn't know he could heal. He just got shot and died for however long he died for.
Yeah, and it's also the context in which the police were called in the first place is indicative of all that, because no one can say there was any kind of threat, violence, or whatever.
No, they were having a conversation.
Yeah, they were having a conversation in the household, and they were sitting, and there was no, this is what Professor Logan could do. This is what this person could do. It was just like, hey, check this out. It's ice now. That's kind of novel for you to see right now. I'm not even showing you that I can like turn the whole house into ice or anything like that. It's just like, here's a small little introduction. And immediately that was like, don't like this. I'm going to get you out. I mean,
he was already, he was already like, all you have to say was you're a mutant and I'll fucking get you for this.
Oh yeah, that was
like,
it.
He didn't need to see anything else. I mean, yes, he gets to see what his brother can do, but he's already like, I mean, already I can't stand that you're a mutant.
Yeah, already he's just like, I can't believe you were supposed to be one of us, whatever that's supposed to mean. And it's one of those things where he really weaponizes his victimhood here, or his supposed one, and makes it a really like, it just escalates everything, and it's terrible.
It is a well done scene for that, I think.
I think another scene that in this movie that they do very, very well to kind of show this perspective too is the mansion scene to build off this.
Like the initial thing where they go in and like abduct people?
Correct. They abduct people. They just invade without a warrant, without like all that kind of stuff.
Oh, but they did get all that stuff. That was the thing.
So
he had that conversation with the president. He was like,
right.
He was like, look, they've got like a jet there. Like, what's that for? If this is just supposed to be just a school, like they got all this stuff there. We need to be able to go in there and get.
It was the spinning of the fake news side of things. Yeah. What a great Steve Bannon like character.
Yeah, so they definitely had like government approval to be there.
Yes. Sorry, I completely blanked out and missed that part. But yeah, that was a scene that spoke to me too, is just how militarized it was immediately without being like that was just a scene that was hard to watch too.
Well, yeah, I mean that was because whatever they told the president, we as the audience know they're there to do something bad. Like they're not there to discover anything. Correct. They're there to hurt them. And I do, the first time I saw the movie, I did think that the initial guy that was kind of in the camouflage, I thought he was Toad just because he kind of looked like it the same nose. But then I was like, oh no, I guess Toad's just not in this movie.
Yeah, it kind of looked like I kind of had that.
I guess what's his name, Ray Park. He kind of looked like Ray Park with paint on.
Yeah, it was just hard to tell, and it was just like, oh, okay, I had a.
Would it make sense if it was Toad?
It would not make sense, no.
Oh, I guess he does use mutants to do what he wants, but you wouldn't use Toad to be like that guy.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah, it just wouldn't work out because my thought about that is that he would have to train more people on how to use the serum and all that kind of stuff. And it looks like he's playing that serum pretty close to the chest.
Yeah, he uses it.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone else gets to actually
Exactly, which
hold
is
it.
why I'm not surprised that because in the it was showing like I like that one scene where it shows Lady Deathstrike is kind of the effects of the serum are kind of wearing off. She's kind of like looking at herself, being like, "Wait, coming to," kind of like, "What's going on? Like what?"
Mhm.
What's and then he's just like immediately doses her with the thing. I think it wouldn't work out for that reason to use Toad because he wouldn't be there to kind of dose him with it immediately or to give direction.
I mean, the only thing I was thinking was, and we don't have to spend too much time on this,
Yeah.
but is that like if you were just using him to invade the X Manor, you wouldn't really need to like mind control him. He's like, yeah, get back those people that fucked you over last movie.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think one thing going back to Lady Deathstrike that one criticism I've heard, which it did really feel valid this watch through, was that like Lady Deathstrike doesn't actually get a chance in this movie. You never really, other than when she kind of breaks, you never see her not under mind control.
Yes.
So her death doesn't really feel fair because it's
Yeah.
like, well, like what would she have done if she wasn't like controlled by Stryker?
Oh, absolutely.
I get that it's
Yeah.
an element of like, I mean, what's he gonna do? She is mind controlled at that time, and she is trying to kill him.
Yes.
But it like, I don't have a fix for it other than like it's just kind of like, oh, like yeah, that sucks that she got killed
Yep.
for actions she probably wouldn't have been doing.
Correct. That is always an uncomfortable topic to talk about with the ethics of that. Yeah,
Mhm.
and that's definitely one of the things that always made me uncomfortable with that death scene and why I actually feel compassion and emotion at that death scene was the idea that she's been controlled her whole life. She gets killed for that.
Yeah.
And it sucks. It really sucks. But yeah.
Yeah, it's something I didn't ever think about until I heard it on another podcast, and then rewatching it this time, I was like, yeah, that's really shitty. Like,
Yeah.
because especially since it's called like X-Men United, there is, I guess, a world where they fight long, and I wouldn't want to actually watch that long of a fight, but like they fought long enough that she wears off again,
Right.
and like they can kind of, but I guess that would come off as cheesy, but like just an element of like they have gone through similar experiences with Stryker and they would bond over that alone. Like she
Right.
doesn't have to join the team, but she could also be like, oh, like let me help you get back at Stryker. And even then
Yeah.
she could work like the way, what's her name, Elektra in the Daredevil show was, where it was like she kind of tempts Wolverine to go back to like the dark side of things. I was like, she would be like, no, let's kill Stryker, and he's like,
Right.
no, I'm like, that's not the right thing either, or whatever. But
Yeah.
like, so that you're not just being like, and now they're best friends. It's just more like she doesn't have to die, and you can see that she's got thoughts of her own.
Yeah, it's kind of tough because if we're given more time to explore if that element, like if it was, I think it would be interesting if they had thought of Deathstrike as a character that could grow into another role into the next movie, because it very easily could have been that fight. Maybe a brick cylinder fell down, they get separated, and they can't fight anymore, and then they have to
Yeah,
run.
that would be good.
That would be a really, really good way. And then like as she runs, it could be like one of those situations where the Winter Soldier,
Right.
the mind control starts wearing off, and like, okay, now what do I do? Or like Nebula, where it's like, okay, well, now you're left in a world where you're not under complete control anymore. What are you going to do? That would make it very, very interesting to me. But unfortunately, I didn't like this, is that they only imagined that for this character, that the brutal death scene be there, which is really, really sad for the character, really, because they could have grown it into something else, where it's like in the third one, they could really made a point of showcasing, okay, now that you have the ability to make your own decisions, are you on the side of the X-Men or on the side of Magneto, which is basically what you would expect that character to be,
right.
in the next one, right? Whose side are you on?
Which I guess would have been nice in this movie, but we kind of know that it wouldn't have mattered because it's very rare that people like stick around in these movies unless they're the main people.
Yes. And so
Like even Nightcrawler isn't back in the other one, but I did read a good reason why he wasn't back in the third movie.
and what was the
I
reason
mean,
for that?
realistically, it was because Alan Cummings did not want to do it, but
Right.
I think they did like a video game that explained that he was just like, "Oh, you guys are just way too violent. That's not my style. Like, I don't want to live that
Like
way."
he's more of a pacifist than anything else. Yeah, I can see that.
I like that reasoning, and
Yeah.
do I want them to slow down the third movie to like give that reasoning? No, because I generally like if the person's not going to show up, I don't really want to invoke their name unless you have to be like, oh, that person died, or like if it's, as I said, like that Pepper Potts stuff from
Mhm.
Civil War where it's actually building on a character moment.
Mhm.
But knowing that it is addressed in other media is
Yeah.
good to know that it's like
Yeah.
he just, and like you watch this movie and I'm like, I can see that, like that does seem like the logical thing of like, we're finished doing what we need to do, but like I just can't keep doing what, because yeah, like unless he was mind controlled, he wouldn't have done what he did at the White House.
Mhm. Because
That's
like
not him.
yeah, for all intents and purposes, his story arc would have been 100% completed, and yeah,
Yeah.
it would be inconsistent for him to join. The way it's unfortunate because the final scene does position himself as because the final time you see them all together is like he's the
At the
way
White
into the
House.
White House and out of the White House, right? So it's really really tough
But
because
that
you're
could
not
still be his last thing of like, oh, I'll get you in and then get you out.
exactly. But I guess this is where the idea of like the post-credit scene could have been used so well, but at the same time, I imagine that there was a plan to continue leave the story arcs of these characters a little bit more open-ended, to write for future sequel possibilities or whatever. This is a question I have for you, and because this is one of the things I remember debating a lot with a lot of my friends at the time for X-Men 2 is what are your feelings on the Mystique and Nightcrawler situation where Nightcrawler
Well,
is supposed to be
I read that
son.
they are like, they're just ignoring that they're mother and son.
Yes, well, they're completely ignoring it, but how, like, what does that make you feel?
I don't care.
Like, you don't, it wasn't a big deal to you, right?
Like, I already know that in the comics they are, but like,
Great.
what difference does it make in this movie if they are?
And that was one of the things that, because I remember as a kid it mattering, but I can't, as now rewatching it, like, I can't understand why I would care now because it doesn't.
Yeah, just because
matter.
it's like, oh, this is something they're going against the grain on. But like, I think as we've grown up, we've realized like
that matters less and less and less.
Yeah, like
yeah.
Unless it's getting in the way of the story.
Yeah.
Like, who cares really? Like,
yeah.
I know people were upset that they didn't acknowledge that like Juggernaut is Professor X's brother, but I'm like, the way those, and I don't mean like blood brother, they're step brothers. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Like when, but it's like, but who cares in that movie? Like that movie's problem isn't that they didn't acknowledge that they're siblings. It's like, nothing about them being siblings or family would change the events of that movie.
No, all it really does is those kind of criticisms and those kind of like things. The only thing it really does is there is a reality that it closes the door for that to be explored in any kind of future material. But then we're also assuming that these.
But I don't think it closes it if they don't acknowledge it. If they were specifically like, this isn't his sibling, then that closes the door. But just not acknowledging it in that first time you see them doesn't mean you can't explore it later.
That's true.
And the only time where they did acknowledge it, and like I still thought it was like a wasted opportunity, was like Quicksilver and Magneto in the like Days of Future Past Apocalypse stuff. Like, it's good character stuff, but it's kind of like, oh, like we didn't really get a chance to like deal with that.
I guess you're right in the sense where if they do kind of set that kind of stuff up and leave it open, we're kind of as an audience expecting them to follow through on that too. And if they don't, then we're hypercritical of them there. So there's a good argument to be said. Like, quite frankly, like in now rewatching this, I can definitely say to the younger me that why does it matter that Nightcrawler and Mystique are not mother and son.
Yeah, like it's just cool that you get to see them use their powers in a great way in this movie.
Exactly. In
More
this
than-
movie, it's not interested in exploring that dynamic, and we already have other media that has explored that dynamic. So it's just like, why not reimagine? And as long as we're staying faithful to the characters, which is what I really, really like, because I think it would be I'd be more having an issue with the whole character of Nightcrawler being written as anything other than a pacifist in the grand scheme of things. That would be more problematic to me than being like, okay, yeah, we just kind of don't care about the fact that they're mother and son, or we're just not confirming it in this one.
Yeah, I think that it wouldn't. There's not room.
Mhm.
The same way this movie didn't really have room to like make Lady Deathstrike a character with like
Yes.
thoughts and feelings.
Yep.
It's like I would want that more than I would want like a line of dialogue that's like, "Oh, that's my son," or "Oh, aren't you my
Agreed.
mom?" Because it's like, where do you go productively with that after that's acknowledged?
Yeah, I mean, it's like that's the issue. Like it forces the audience to be like, well, now you have to. It pigeonholes the writers into addressing that in the third one.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it forces us to be like, here's another criticism. I'm just more interested, I guess, in now because I know this was an issue for me then. Them building a consistent world. Within their own rules and their own skill set, as opposed to following what the comic accurate stuff is.
Yeah, which I think we got to, because Kevin Feige is a producer on this one as well.
Mhm.
I thought he was just on the first X-Men, but he's listed on this one too.
Right.
But like I think Kevin Feige got there with the MCU of like, doesn't matter if this isn't going the way you thought it would in the comics. This is consistent with what we've set up.
Yes.
In our cinematic universe.
Yep.
And X-Men, as we've talked about many times on this podcast, never really ended up sticking to that. And so you just have to be like, whatever. This movie is this movie. Anything that links it to other movies is nice to have, but there's no point in trying to like be like, no, because of the last movie you said that, because they don't care.
Yeah, they do not care.
It doesn't matter to them.
No. I think are you like, do you know if there's a YouTuber that's gone out there and pointed out all the continuity errors in the X-Men
I'm
franchise?
sure there
yet?
must be.
There must be, right?
Not something I would seek out. I think, yeah, like that CinemaSin style of things. I'm just like, I don't know, man. Like, why not talk about stuff you like? That's more my thing. Like, that's why we're doing this, right? Like, we're not going to be like,
I'm not
like,
interested
let's
in
do
exploring that in this podcast. I'm just curious as to like if someone's
I know.
taking
It's
the
just
time to do that, because it seems like such a waste of time. And well, I don't know.
I'm
it just
sure
seems
people
weird.
feel some kind of like they've exercised some kind of demon by doing it, and if it makes them feel good, I hope it does. Like, I hope that it genuinely like makes that YouTuber feel good, that they're like, good, I've purged all of this, I put it out there. But I don't think it makes them feel good. I think they just like are like, man, this didn't happen, this happened. It's like, yeah, those are nice conversations to have with your friends, but like you're going out there, like you're making videos, you're putting time into editing this. Like, imagine if you did something that like truly made you happy. It doesn't have to be something I consider positive, but like if it actually, and again, we're not talking about like hurting people or anything like that, but like if you put the same effort into a video that actually at the end result of it made you happy, that would make me feel better than like something that continues this anger you have about something.
Yeah, because it's never like a one and done situation. It's never like, oh, let's point out all the inaccuracies in Jurassic Park and then we're done with it. That's the only negative video we make. It's a perpetual thing. Like, this is our brand, we're just going to shit all over other media, and I'm not really interested in doing that. I'm just wondering from there is a guilty pleasure in seeing something like that for myself, I must admit, but I'm not interested in exploring that. I'm just wondering if you've seen anything here.
No, but that's because I like avoid that kind of stuff.
That's fair.
It's not. I tried, like I like I used to watch like Letter Media. I used to watch
Mm.
like Cinema Sins, and I'm just like, this is just dumb now. I'm watching. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, yep. You're gonna say this. You're gonna say that. Great, and like it just seems like obtuse at certain points. Some of their complaints. I'm like, but that's you just want to say that so that it can be a complaint, and you're like getting to your 15-minute mark. It doesn't really seem like a valid criticism.
Mhm. A question I have for you is the production of this. Was there any kind of issues or incidents from a production standpoint that caused this movie
I
to
could just
change?
assume yes, but I don't know anything for
But
sure.
it wasn't that public, is what I'm getting at, right? Like there
No,
wasn't
I
anything that
think
was.
by that time they were like, well, we're already in on the whole Bryan Singer stuff. So one thing that it didn't change the script, it just changes that last scene, which doesn't even really seem like useful to me when it's just Cyclops, Wolverine, and Professor X in the mansion.
Yeah.
Because Hugh Jackman was filming Van Helsing at that time, he was in his hair is different. I knew that looking at the movie, and I was like, it doesn't seem that different. But
Mm.
like it's different because he had to grow his hair out for Van Helsing, so they had more hair to work with to make his little thing. That's
That weird
it's
haircut.
the only thing in the trivia that I saw that was like, oh, okay. Like, and they had to work out a deal so that he could get the day off from Van Helsing to shoot this scene.
Mm. Mm. It wasn't the mustache gate
No.
that Justice League suffered from. At least they were willing to play ball, or there was a good enough workaround.
Yeah,
and it wasn't the mustache thing.
And I think it's other than that, it was just stuff that we talked about where it was like they
Yeah.
were gonna do this, but then they took it out. Like
it was
Gambit and the Beast thing.
Yeah.
The Toad versus Nightcrawler thing.
Mhm.
And I think that probably, other than the Gambit thing, which they did film, and I can only assume they did film the Hank McCoy thing, the Beast thing.
I think the article here says they did actually do it. They just cut it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And boy, that would have been kind of cool. But do you think? I mean, do you think it would have been?
Yeah, I wanted to see it. If that's it.
Yeah, like I
wanted
wanted to see it. Like there's just, but see, it's hard to see. Like I want to see it because every time I say these things, it's just like, oh, but then they would have done that in X3, or like
I don't know if he would. Oh yeah, because he was supposed to be an X. Gambit was supposed to be an X3.
Yeah. So it's just one of those things, because,
but not as a main character.
To,
I think he would have just been in it. Like again, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It's so hard for me to be like, because I love this movie so much because it does so many things so well, and it's not dated. You see, like it holds up the same memory that I have. It wasn't like rewatching Spider-Man and being like, oh my God, this is a totally different movie, this rewatch. This rewatch was the exact same movie. And I really love it for that. Yeah, it was like, this is how I remember it. I'm seeing it differently, obviously. Like the stuff that mattered to me back then doesn't matter to me now.
Right.
But it is one of those movies where I'm like, no, it's the same movie that I remember it being, which is really, really cool. So this movie was a good one. It's a lot more fun. One of the things is they always seem to not be interested in exploring Colossus as a character, but always seem to be interested in showing him off in these movies.
Why not, man? Show that off. It's that does seem to be like the only continuity. I'm pretty sure it is the same actor every time for these. Obviously, Deadpool, it's a different actor for a specific reason, but like I'm pretty sure he is Colossus every time.
Yes.
In this, which is an interesting bit of continuity considering, as you said, he's not really a character they explore.
Yep.
He's just there to do cool transitions from human to metal skin.
Yeah, and to have like a gratuitous shirtless scene.
Yeah, every time he shows up not in a Deadpool movie, it's the same guy, Daniel Cudmore.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah.
I think they were trying to get him to be in Deadpool, and he, I mean, rightfully so, probably was like, oh, I want more money. And I think they were like, and we are going to overdub your voice. It's not going to be your voice. So he probably was like, nah.
Yeah.
I think he thought he could play chicken with them, and they're like, oh, we'll just get someone else then.
Yeah. Yeah, that sucks for him.
It sucks for him, yeah.
Yeah, it sucks for him. Yeah, this time the this is just, I remember this movie being the exact same of what I just watched, and that's the thing.
That's
that
a good feeling.
Yeah, it's a really good feeling right now to have that, and then to explore it from these new issues and topics and seeing it from this new lens. It's just one of the, it's a good one. I don't know what else to say about it, genuinely.
Yeah, I think that it's the strongest Bryan Singer film I've seen. I don't know. Maybe if I rewatch Usual Suspects.
So my question is, what I'm trying to get at is, what are the criticisms that you have of this? Because I'm not pulling up many new criticisms other than that the whole, they shafted Jubilee again and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that stuff I didn't even care to bring up again.
Yeah.
Like, it just is what it is. No, it's just more like by the end of it, I was kind of like, okay, yeah. Like I feel like it's just my attention span. I was just like, yeah, I wish there was a cleaner, like more immediate ending. Like I feel like there's a lot of them gathering up the kids to get out of the compound, because I don't find the middle to be slow. It's just kind of the ending. I kind of feel like I'm numb to all the action beats. I'm kind of like,
I suppose you're right, because there's multiple endings.
There is multiple endings, but
Yep.
there's also like, again, like in another movie, that Lady Deathstrike fight would have been a big deal because you could also do some character work there, but they don't have time because they're also offsetting that with all these reveals of Jason Stryker and Professor X, which is going on at the same time.
Right.
Plus the like immediate, like, we got to get out of here. This dam's gonna blow, and like what's going on with Magneto and Pyro and all this. So it's just kind of like, it's a lot of stuff happening, and I'm kind of just like, all right, well.
Yeah. And then because that is a big finale piece, and by the time you're forced to deal with them coming back to the White House and having that one scene, which is a good scene, you're just kind of like, but I've said bye to the movie already. It's kind of like the same thing that
and then you have two goodbyes after that, because it's
exactly.
That White House thing is a good like bookend thing. It started at the White House, it didn't end at the White House, but then you go back to the X Mansion, and then you have to have the Phoenix reveal, and it's kind of like, I mean, I didn't need two of those things.
Yeah. But my thing about the Phoenix reveal is, do you think that was absolutely necessary? I firmly believe that there was enough hints dropped throughout that they didn't need to do that again.
I think people liked it. Like the person that I saw the movie with, my friend, when we saw it in theaters, was like, "Fuck yeah!" Like Phoenix. Like they're not just because there's a lot of it. Like I guess because of the way they use the characters, that it's like, oh, are they just going to give her Phoenix powers and just say that was always the case?
Right.
But I guess showing that Phoenix is like, well, they're gonna have to address it now that they've shown the Phoenix instead of just showing that she's got Phoenix powers. I think that is fan service that, like, for me doesn't really matter, because I would read X-Men comics, but I didn't read them like with any kind of continuity. I just like, oh yeah, whatever. Like I like Wolverine. Is he on the cover? Which meant that sometimes I was just reading like X-Force stuff. I wasn't even reading X-Men. And so like the only thing I really cared about was the show. And back then I don't know that I actually like was cognizant of that kind of continuity they were doing and the storylines they were doing. I was just like, yeah, it's Wolverine's there, Beast's there, cool. So I all that to say, I wasn't really, even though X-Men was in the rotation of like the 3 comic book stuff I would read, Batman, X-Men, and Spider-Man, I didn't really care that much about it. It was just kind of like, yeah, they're around, I have easy access to it. And so I think for people who care about the Phoenix saga, that probably meant something more than it meant to me.
Yeah. It's just because you think about that last act, and you're right. It's just so cluttered with goodbyes that you start to think, what could you essentially cut? The revelation of Phoenix, to me, or the confirmation of Phoenix coming in the third one is not something. You're right? Is something that genuinely I loved at the time too. But I'm just thinking, like, of all three of those, now knowing what the whole trilogy laid out in front of us.
I would cut the Professor X, Cyclops, and Wolverine thing. I don't even remember what they said. It didn't mean anything to me. It's like a weird thing. I would cut that and go from the White House thing, because they're already setting up like, look, we've got our eye on you, and then it's the same dialogue that opened the first movie but said by Jean Grey. Like, that seems like a cool way to like send off the movie. Yeah
Cool. No, I agree. Like, they need to clean that up a little bit toward the end.
Like, it doesn't mean that I think the movie's bad now, like in hindsight. It was just like I was struck by how like much I didn't care by the end. I was just kind of like, yeah. And like, I don't think you would have that feeling the first time you see this movie.
No, I don't think so.
It's more just like, now that I'm rewatching it, this is what we're doing, right? We're revisiting these things. I was just like, I'm not that happy with the ending.
Yeah, it's not as noticeable as in Lord of the Rings, where
that would be the main example of like, wow, we really got faked out.
I remember in theaters, I'm like, oh, are you serious? We're really like the first watch through, like, we're really not done here. Like, what's going on? Like, even in the theaters, and that's not before the take home extended cuts. So it's a struggle to get through those sometimes. This one just does it, and you just notice it more, I guess, from a rewatch perspective as opposed to a first watch through.
Yeah, I think the first watch, it's so fun, and like,
it is.
You got them having to work together. You've got the betrayal at the end, like, and especially since that's not how it plays out in the comic book that they're referencing. Like, even that would be exciting. That they're like, holy shit, they're making it so that Magneto actually is going to abandon Professor X. Like, cool. Like, that is a cool change to that storyline. It's just, now that I've seen it a bunch of times, I'm just like, I get where they're going to end up, and I think a lot of that also comes down to like, I also know that the third movie isn't really going to live up to the potential that this movie sets up. Yeah,
and I think that's one of the big, and this is one of the things that we talked about beforehand, is just looking at what this sets up. That independently is brilliant. It sets up, oh, we're going to get this Phoenix Saga. We're going to get the Dark Phoenix Saga, and it's going to be awesome. Like we're promised this stuff, and then it's hard to not be bitter about seeing that scene when we know exactly what we get, which is X-Men 3: The Last Stand. That is the problem watching this movie this time around, is that part doesn't hold up. Because I remember that being like, this is going to be the event of the century. Like, when I watched the first time around, being like, this is going to be sick, Dark Phoenix. Like, it's coming, it's happening. And then actually walking out of X3 being like, that was terrible. It's hard to not have that.
I mean, one thing it does set up that they do pay off is that conversation they have where like Professor X and Stryker are talking about, like, this isn't a disease. I mean, it happens multiple times. It probably even happens in the first movie, but like that one through line of people, some mutants even being like, this is a disease I can cure. Yeah. And then the third movie deals specifically with a cure for this. It does feel like it's culminating these three, but it is a culmination of these three movies. It's just it's tacked on, or for me anyway, it feels like the Dark Phoenix stuff is tacked on to that movie, which should have been the logical next movie, which is this cure comes up, and now everyone's got to like put their money where their mouth is. Like, where do you stand now that like you, like Rogue, you always felt like, oh, I should just cure myself, and it's like, well, now you have that option. What's going to happen? Yep. But it's all mixed together with Dark Phoenix Saga, which is a big event. It's not like an A story, B story thing. Like, it's like, well, you just need to deal with that. You can't have that be another storyline in this movie.
Yeah. And that's kind of one of many issues with X-Men 3 is the idea that there's so many storylines in a trilogy format. Because I think back then they only thought of this as a trilogy. Like, there was no foresight into thinking.
They don't think of it just as
well, I mean, not just as a trilogy, because obviously the spin-offs were happening. But did you think they were thinking the First Class side of things? and that there
I
was
think they were like, we're going to be making that, because you have to remember this isn't Marvel where like they can just be like, we have this in perpetuity. It's like we
Right.
need to make these movies or else we lose the rights.
Oh, I see.
So they're thinking we need to be using this property as much as possible, especially if we know this works. We've already got 2 in the can, like, or by the time the first one did well, they're like, okay, this works. We can just like get going on this stuff.
Fair enough.
But yeah, I don't. Yeah, because it's Fox, they were like, we need, because that's
Yep.
another thing I've heard is that like Fox might get, or sorry, Fox was bought out already. Sony might get bought out, and it's like, so all of that stuff about like is Peter Parker will be irrelevant because that was part of the clause. You own this, so if you get sold or something, you lose the rights. The same would be for Fox. Same with Sony. So it's like, no, you need to be using them. And so yeah, I wouldn't ever think they just thought of it as just a trilogy. I think it was always like, we need to be making as much of this as possible, as long as we're in this business.
Gotcha.
But yeah, that is X2, X-Men United. What, it was really fun. I'm glad that the stuff that I thought made it fundamentally good movie held up.
Yep.
Even though like that's minor stuff to me, like the ending stuff, like that's just my own personal attention span. That has nothing to do with the movie. So yeah, I think it held up really well. Do you want to rate it?
Yeah, so this is if you want me to go first, yeah, for sure. This is a definitely strong 8.5 to me.
Oh shit, we have the same.
We got the same
rating.
again?
Yeah.
Shit. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I like how I mean, yeah, we're like this. I really like how the things I liked about it the first time around just held up, and the things that matter to me matter less this time around, and different things matter to me for this one.
Yeah.
So it was really, really good to watch from that perspective. With the police brutality stuff angle is just it's really good to see it from that perspective, and that whole scene play out like that.
It's a well done movie.
Yep.
It's very unfortunate the person at the helm is who they are.
Yes, that is the one thing.
That is all I'll say about that.
Yep.
But I like Hugh Jackman, and I think, yeah, even though I don't like X3, that's where I was like, oh, Hugh Jackman's just really good at this. He is good at it in this. Like, you really feel his pain, but like X3 is where I was like, all right.
Yeah, because you watch X3 for the Hugh Jackman stuff. Basically nothing.
Yeah, because he's got to. I mean, Storm is the leader, but you got to carry it. Yep. And I guess we didn't say it, but yeah, Halle Berry at this point is like, I'm not doing that accent. I'm American now.
Yeah.
I think that helped. Whatever she did, whatever decision was made to be like, hey, you know, if the accent's really that big of a deal for you, just don't do it. That helped her performance.
Yeah, and
one less thing to be hung up on.
Yeah, it was just one of the thing I was thinking is that they in this version really had like they could have kept the African. They were definitely trying to fumble. Well, they were fumbling with it, the African aspect of Storm's character, but they didn't even use the name of the person. Like Aurora Monroe is Storm's name, but I don't think they recall them ever saying that. They do
use it. I don't remember if they said it in the second one. They said it in the first one.
Oh, okay. I didn't pick up. I can't remember that from the first one, but yeah. Okay, cool. So they just washed that all out. And
it doesn't seem like a particularly African name though. So
no, it doesn't.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
No, not something I'm too upset about either.
You're not too upset about this? Okay.
No. It is what it is. Like, I think that's always going to be a hard character because I don't think I don't know that she's written in that way, and I don't think people care that much about her actual background, and other than in so much as she came up as like a street thief and then stopped being a street thief. But like, that could happen anywhere.
Yeah, and I think
I
the
just think
X.
that it's important that that's part of it, because there are elements of that play into her character in a way, and obviously not why she has her powers, but because she has those powers and where she grew up
Mhm.
informs who she is and like what she does. And it is part of what they did in the second one, of the whole like, I'm just so angry,
Yep.
I'm not here, like, which I think is in direct contrast to the first one. Like, I don't feel like she was angry. I think she was just kind of like, yeah, this is what we do, we're doing the right thing. But I think that anger does come from being like, I should be a fucking god, like I was worshipped like where I came from, and now like I have to like worry about like what people are going to do to me because humans are assholes.
Yeah, it's true.
Anyway, that's X2. Spider-Man 2 is next. I just looked it up, so that should be fun. I hope it holds up. I'm glad X2 held up. I don't think Spider-Man 2 will hold up as much, but
I'm just looking forward to more of the horror elements that are more clearly,
like the Doc Ock stuff.
Yeah, more clearly in Spider-Man 2. That's the stuff I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, we'll see. I think it's the same amount.
Yeah.
Having rewatched, we just did the Spider-Man one. Feels like it's the same amount. It's just one of the scenes is directly like referencing like Evil Dead stuff.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much for listening. We are part of That Shelf Podcast Network, so please go to thatshelf.com. You'll see us. You'll see Bad Gay Movies, Black Hole Films, Changing Reels, Composers, No Budget Nightmares, What a Nice Theme Song, and more. And if you want to see older episodes of our podcast, please go to tdfeverything.com/spoiledrotten. We are at TDF Spoiled on Twitter. Our email is spoiledpodcast@gmail.com. So please get in touch with us there. Our social media is on the links that I've provided already. And you can get in touch with us there, as well as rate, review, share, and subscribe on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Radio Public, and iHeartRadio, and more. And yeah, just really get the word out about our podcast, because we love talking about things, and we love talking to you about talking about those things.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. Anything you want to add, Ben?
No, other than, of course, stay safe, wear your masks, do all that kind of stuff. Whatever current health advice is.
Yeah. We're doing these in advance, so.
Yeah, because we're stockpiling these and releasing it then. So whatever the relevant health advice is then, please do that, because it's very important. Stay safe, continue to fight the power, all that good stuff.
All right. Bye-bye.
This has been a TDF Everything production, brah.